Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
But no, I'm not convinced about that. I think that we should continue to investigate what went on in China until we find out, to the best of our ability, exactly what happened. Certainly, the people who've investigated say it likely was the emergence from an animal reservoir that then infected individuals, but it could have been something else. And we need to find that out. So, that's the reason why I said I'm perfectly in favor of any investigation that looks into the origin of the virus.
Well, would you look at that? No one less than Dr. Anthony Fauci himself saying, maybe after all, after saying it was fake news for 14 months, maybe in fact the virus from Wuhan came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, something that if you were to have said yourself, you would have been called a conspiracy theorist, a fake news promoter. And in fact, YouTube has been extremely strict in policing contrarian ideas like that, talking about vaccines or the Wuhan virus, or even saying phrases like China virus. Well, that was enough to get my own book by that same title banned by Amazon, not once, but twice. And yet there's Fauci saying, no, it's something we should take a look at. Well, what do we make of the media industrial complex that itself lies, but accuses others of lying to expose them? Well, that is the thesis of the book by our next guest. His name is Alex Marlow. He's the boss of Breitbart.com, and his book is called Breaking the News, Exposing the Establishment Media's Hidden Deals and Secret Corruption. And Alex Marlow joins us now from Washington, D.C. Well, congratulations on this book. And I just want to say congratulations on Breitbart.com. I feel like this book, at least how you've laid it out, is a distillation of the entire mission of Breitbart.com, isn't it?
I think it is, Ezra. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to catch up, and we love our Canadian readers, of which we have very many, which is very heartening and exciting to us at Breitbart. But Breitbart is only necessary because the establishment media is so horrible at their jobs, and apparently they're getting worse. The good news is it does seem like, at least in the United States, more and more people every year wisen up to this fact. Something catches their eye and they think, wait a minute, that's not quite right. And this could be one of those examples, the one that you lay out with the virus perhaps coming from the lab. Now, I'm pretty agnostic. I don't know if it's from the lab or from the wet market, or it could have been in the wet market and then could have went to the lab and then got out. None of that matters to me nearly as much as the fact that the establishment media would have deplatformed you, thrown you offline, if you even hinted that maybe this coincidental lab that just happened to be right there in Wuhan, that we happen to be funding in the United States, that might have had something to do with this virus. Even that suggestion was grounds for cancellation. Of course it was absurd. Of course the lab was at least a legitimate possibility. And we were just sitting here in conservative media going, how crazy do these people think we are to dismiss this out of hand like that? Yeah, that's exactly what the establishment did.
Yeah, there's a couple of Canadian angles there too. Our viewers know this. After the pandemic, Trudeau donated over $800,000 in foreign aid to the lab. It's one thing to have been involved with that lab to begin with, but after the pandemic, Trudeau was still sending money over. And of course, we also see our own lab crisis. There's a high-risk virus lab in Winnipeg, Canada, that had Chinese nationals working at it until it was shut down by the RCMP. But you're not allowed to talk about these things. At best, they'll call you racist. But at worst, they'll just vaporize you, cancel your channel, knock you off Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's what I'm worried about. You said a moment ago, Alex, that you think Americans are wising up to it, and I'll add Canadians in that too. I think some are, but I think whatever progress is being made about enlightening people, things are getting worse on the ground. More people than ever are banned, shadow banned, kicked off their accounts. So it may be that people are wising up, but just as fast as that's happening, they're being, depersoned. What do you think of that?
Yeah, you're right about this, because the militant wing of the institutional left in the United States, and I'm sure it's similar up north where you guys are, it is getting more powerful, more angry, and more emboldened because they keep getting victories. So even though I think they're relatively few in number, I would say at most maybe 30% in the United States, they seem to have overwhelmed all of our major corporations and virtually every media establishment and tech platform. And that's very scary because even if, let's say, 50 or even 60% of people are with us ideologically, we're kind of powerless to push back against that 30% number that are so determined to throw off any thought that they disagree with from the web. They don't think about, in America, we've got the First Amendment, of course, and it is something that should be cherished. It should be held dear. Instead, we treat it as just some sort of statute, some sort of law that's on the books to be, where we could pick and choose when we want to apply it. It needs to drive us. It needs to drive what we do day in and day out, or else we're going to lose the ability to speak freely as we give that power and we outsource it solely to Silicon Valley and the establishment news.
The book is called Breaking the News, Exposing the Establishment, Media's Hidden Deals and Secret Corruption. We'll have an Amazon link underneath this video. One of the things I'm worried about is that especially the Democrat Party in the United States and Joe Biden, they've created this threat. They call it domestic violent extremists. It's another way of saying people who oppose Biden so deeply, they're a terrorist risk. We see that same language being echoed up here in Canada. I see little or no evidence that the right is a risk of violence, especially in Canada. It just hasn't been. But this constant drumbeat, we've got to silence voices like Rebel News or Breitbart.com or Facebook pages because they make the jump to inciting violence. If you're a conservative, well, you're 1 inch away from going postal about it. How do you deal with that? Because that's my great worry, is that being conservative will now be criminalized.
That's exactly right. We're now at a point in the United States, at least, where conservative thought is considered violence and violent actions by the left is excused. And you see it with the mostly peaceful riots from Black Lives Matter, that a lot of that was actually seen as acceptable because the cause was just in the eyes of the woke media. And I break down the history of this in the book, and I try to explain how we got to this point. But the point we're at is incredibly scary. And this is being used as the pretext to throw people offline, despite the fact, Ezra, that there is so little violence coming from the right in the United States of America. January 6th, 4 Trump supporters died. We were lied to about what happened to Officer Sicknick. This wasn't some sort of massive violent event. It was a bad day. It was a terrible day for people who support Donald Trump. And I disavowed all of the violent actions at the time, and I do so in the book. But that said, it didn't turn into this widespread violent movement the way Black Lives Matter turned into. And yet the media treats still to this day, January 6th, like it was the worst day in American history, and Black Lives Matter like it's some sort of noble cause. Half of America, at least, if not more, sees this as absurd. But this has been happening for a while. The media has been building up to this moment where they're going to portray normative conservative thinking as cancelable, as inspiring violence. Ezra, I don't know any white nationalists. I'm not saying they're not out there. I don't know any of them. Yeah. I don't know a lot of QAnon supporters. I think I know one. Yeah. But we're constantly told that those are the people that represent the entirety of conservative America, and it's just not accurate. And it's being the design is to throw us off their platforms.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I was just thinking about it. In my entire life, I'm 49. I grew up in a rural, suburb of Calgary. I went to a country school. My sister and I were the only 2 Jews in a school of 400 kids. I've been to places where you're supposed to find discrimination. In my 49 years, I have never seen a swastika. I've never seen a Nazi flag, except very recently, for example, the pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas protests. Sure. So we've been conditioned and trained to be on the alert for Nazis on the right. And I have to tell you, I consider myself Jewish, and I'm interested in Jewish cultural things, and I'm worried about anti-Semitism. I'm on the alert for it. I've never in my life seen a swastika except at a pro-Hamas rally, and I noticed the deafening silence from the official hate finders general on the left, the Anti-Defamation League, the SPLC. Up here we got something called the Canadian Anti-Hate Network. Just absolutely silent when you see swastikas or new Islamic style Nazism on the left. But boy, are they hunting for it on the right, including amongst Jewish conservatives. I think they're getting away with it more than maybe you say they are, or certainly more than they are in America. I think Canada, that's closer to conventional wisdom than the 60-30 split you were talking about before.
Well, I think that they are getting away with it. That's true. I just don't think that they're convincing as many people as they think they are. Case in point, we were told Donald Trump was the biggest racist of all time, and racial hatred had just gotten so much worse under Trump. And then he got 10 million more votes the second time around, including increasing the vote with Black and Latino Americans, so which is a great sign. But your point, I've lived exactly what you've described at Breitbart, is we're constantly being told that we're some sort of racist outlet. I know you're close with Joel Pollack, who's an Orthodox Jew, is one of our top editors. Our copy chief is a Black woman. Our entertainment editor is a Black man. Our world editor is a Latino woman. We have gay writers. Have throughout all time. The company's owned by Jews. Jews own our company, and it is. And I'm half Jewish myself. We're proud of that. We're proud to be pro-Israel. It's all of this, and we're supposed to be this font of racism. But Ezra, no one in the establishment media wants to give me the platform that you're giving me. And if they do, it's merely to attack me. And this way I can explain that to you, and your audience is probably chuckling, thinking, wow, I had no idea about that with Breitbart. Well, that's the truth, and people hold that back because it doesn't fit that narrative.
The book is called Breaking the News, Exposing the Establishment Media's Hidden Deals and Secret Corruption. Permit me to ask you a question, because you mention it in a promotion for the book. I never had the pleasure of meeting Andrew Breitbart in person, but I did interview him a couple of times at Sun News Network, and I found him electrifying. Let me just read one sentence from your promo. You say, Breitbart began mentoring Marlow, you were just a 21-year-old student at the time, on how to fight the culture war one headline at a time and to remain resilient in the face of personal attacks. Obviously, you had an outstanding opportunity to be mentored by really, I think Andrew Breitbart was a visionary in how he reframed things. What advice would you have for me personally, for Rebel News, for other journalists, for other people in the public sphere? You say remain resilient in the face of personal attacks. How?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm always happy to talk about Andrew, who I owe so much to, as we all do. At Breitbart, really all of conservative media, he laid out the blueprint, as I know we discussed a little bit offline. He laid out the blueprint that so many of us follow, and I'm thrilled to get to call him my mentor. And Andrew, he shared something with me that was very clarifying, is that he had two personas, jocularity and righteous indignation, which basically meant he would try to get through to people using humor when he could. And when humor wasn't getting through, then he would use his righteous indignation, his righteous anger. And those are the skill sets that we employ at Breitbart most of the time. When we feel like people are open-minded and are willing to laugh at themselves and are willing to see their own foibles, poking fun is sometimes the best approach. But when they're really entrenched and they're really weaponized and they're really pugilistic and they're trying to destroy what we stand for and maybe the people in our lives, then you got to turn on your righteous indignation, and you got to make sure never to give an inch and to be as tough as humanly possible. And this includes defying the establishment no matter what the cost. Again, I disavow violence, but it's still important to think of the perspective that you want to be, you want to have incredible willpower in the face of adversity, which is constantly surrounding us.
Yeah, you know what? I think that duality, it made me think of the phrase that Mark Stein used to use, happy warrior. You're a happy warrior. You fight like hell, but you also have a laugh, and you realize you can't be dour all the time. And you got to live too. You can't just fight. I don't know. Maybe that would sum it up. Let me ask you this.
No, perfect. Yeah, it's perfect. If people want a dialogue, have the dialogue. Be respectful. Make your arguments. Let the best ideas win. But if they don't, then you should not be afraid to call out names, to investigate, to get to the bottom of whatever is the true motivation behind a person's actions, and to call them out for it.
I want to ask you a question. You know, frankly, this question is probably more in the vein of personal advice. Again, I'm asking you all these personal questions because in some way we have not a lot of Canadian templates to learn from. There's not a lot of conservative media in Canada. I look to the States, I look at Glenn Beck, I look at what Drudge Report was until recently, I look at the late Rush Limbaugh, and I look at, you know, Daily Caller, which is founded by some alumni of yours, and I look at Breitbart.com. And we really don't have a lot up here on this side of the border. Do you have advice on how to deal with deeper deplatforming. I mean, YouTube suspended us, they let us back on, but I think it's a ticking time bomb there. PayPal, just without notice, explanation, or appeal, ended a 6-year relationship. We did, close to $10 million with PayPal, just gone, no explanation. I'm a happy warrior. I think we're all happy warriors up here. We love to just fight and fight. And we fight fair fights, but what happens if it's just some thunderbolt from Mount Olympus and we wake up one day and we're just not even on the internet?
Yeah, there's 2 ways to fight back. And the first thing is with the law. And I know this is very tough for conservatives because we all have libertarian streaks and we would love for just the free market to sort this stuff out. But we're running out of time. The free market thus far has benefited the people who are trying to control our speech and our freedoms. And these are people who are not elected. No one put them in charge. They're just these huge businesses, particularly out of Silicon Valley, with these giant multinational interests who don't care about America. They don't care about Canada. They care about their bottom line and advancing this left-wing globalist agenda. And where the law can apply, and Canadian law is going to be different, we should think about ways to use the law to try to make sure we're holding these entities accountable, particularly the big tech giants. In America, we need some reforms to antitrust. We need to break up these companies if we can. We have this thing called Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which has been a disaster, which has allowed the left basically to spread whatever fake news they want and then to deplatform anyone they want for whatever reason. We need to reform that as well. That's got to be for starters. But the other thing is we do need to build our own stuff, and it's really hard to do. Parler tried to build their own Twitter, and Amazon threw them off their servers, and it created a huge headache that they haven't fully recovered from, though I'm optimistic they will down the road. But this is why it's going to be a multi-decade process. And so if you're a financier and you're watching this, if you've got someone with money, if you want to support independent media, I recommend doing it. And we need time to try and fail and have trial and error and to see what's going to stick, what's going to survive court challenges, and what new platforms and entities can get off the ground and start making a difference. It's going to be a long effort. And trust me, the left will be clawing to get whatever territory we take back in real time. So it's going to be a fight, and we got to get into it right now. We can't wait.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think you're right not to say there's a silver bullet. I think that it took decades to get into this problem. I think it will likely take decades. As you say, one headline at a time to get out of it. Well, listen, it's great to catch up with you. Thank you for coming on our show up here. We'll send an email to our viewers. We'll put this on YouTube and conservative-leaning sites like Rumble and libertarian sites like Odyssey and SuperU, because we can't just use the big tech platform. So thank you, Alex Marlow. Once more, I'll say the name of the book. We'll put the cover on the screen again. It's called Breaking the News: Exposing the Establishment Media's Hidden Deals and Secret Corruption. I know we spoke more about you and Breitbart and some of the lessons, but I get the feeling that's really what this book is, an expression of the Breitbart mindset and your mindset as the leader of that place.
It comes through a lot, but I do think that what people will really get a lot out of the book is all the research. I got to say, I spent a year with a small team of really serious journalists doing deep dives into these corporations. And what I found was frankly stunning. I've identified who I believe is the new Soros operating in the United States. I've exposed the extent to which American businesses are doing business with the communist Chinese and how much they're willing to compromise in order to maintain access to China. Some of the stuff is truly frightening. The conflict of interest in terms of the brand name people in our establishment press. So there's a lot of revelations in the book as well. And I think a lot of explanation of where we are and how we got there.
Well, I can hardly wait to learn who this new Soros is, because the old Soros was bad enough. Alex Marlow, great to see you. Thanks for your time. Good luck out there.
Ezra, appreciate it. My pleasure.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.